All right. So thank you, Kelsey, so much for joining us. And to give you guys a little bit of a bio about Kelsey before she gets started. As a counselor, coach, and training professional, Kelsey presents educational programs for various healthcare organizations, as well as numerous private companies and employee assistant programs. She specializes in facilitating individual coaching for individuals navigating the elder care maze. She also provides coaching for leaders and teams to support their cohesiveness and development. She has a BA from Kent State in individual and family studies, is a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor, certified dementia practitioner, and certified too young to retire facilitator. Kelsey is the president of the Elder Care Professionals of Ohio, a geriatric care company focused on professional development opportunities in the field of healthcare. She has established hundreds of businesses to business relationships through the award-winning network division. And since 1998, Kelsey has been an active member of the Northern Ohio chapter of Employee Assistance Professionals Association. She is currently the co-chair of the Work-Life Committee and the chairperson of the Website Committee. Kelsey also is an active member of the Conference Planning Committee for the Cuyahoga County Conference on Aging and also supports the Hoarding Connection of Cuyahoga County. Woo, Kelsey, you do a lot. That is amazing.
I'm like, yeah, let's throw this away. Let's just get on with it.
No, that's amazing. It's great to get your bio because I did get, when I picked which webinars we were going to have done with Impact, it didn't really give me a background on the practitioners.
Okay.
So it's nice to kind of see your experience and whatnot, but you can go ahead and get started if you're ready.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. And I'm going to actually get rid of my video here because I've got some notes and I know you guys don't want to watch me read notes today. So it's hard enough to be inside in this beautiful day. And you don't need to be watching me. So again, thank you for joining me today. And just a few housekeeping items. You will receive the PowerPoint after the program, so you don't have to be writing down everything. I will make a lot of additional comments that you might want to listen for, but just know that you'll get that. And yes, as a supportive counselor and coach for Impact, just a reminder, the final slide in this program has Impact's contact information. So if you're not familiar with them, it's a great EAP that can support you and your family members with free supportive coaching and counseling. So if there's something in the area of caregiving that you are struggling with or want some guidance on, that's something that I can do through that benefit for you. So contact Impact at any time. So this program, Emotional Resilience and Stress from Stress to Success. Stress management programs are the most commonly requested programs in the workplace. Go figure. And especially in the last 2 years. So I will tell you that this topic in itself, stress and resiliency, that request has gone through the roof with most companies because we're dealing with stress and stressful situations we have never dealt with before. So, we're trying to understand how do we do so many things within all these stressful experiences and still be resilient and still be successful. And not want to just, bury our heads in a hole, right? So we're going to talk a lot about these different types of stress today. Do kind of a deep dive into this so that you really understand stress. So if somebody says to you, hey, what is stress anywhere? You can really explain that to them. And I also want to say that stress kind of gets a bad rap. We all need it. There's a lot of motivating factors within stress. And so what we're trying to do is always establish like a baseline, like where are we at every single day? And if we have stress that occurs in our lives, how do we return to that baseline as quickly as possible? And that's really one of the best ways to define what resiliency is. So the common term for good stress, if you will, is called eustress. Now, this is not in the program, so if you want to write this down, it's EUSTRESS. And it is positive because it's our motivator. So if we are seeing something dangerous, right, it's going to motivate us to flee from that, to take cover. Okay, so that's a good example of positive stress. It's also our motivator if we have deadlines, if we need to be home by a certain time, if we have to make sure we get to the store or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why stress exists and a lot of positives ones. So I'm not going to throw it all out, baby with the bathwater. There are positives, and we're going to talk about that. And we all have a lot of evidence-based studies now that are actually showing how we approach stress, especially how we think, can definitely be very helpful for us. So I'm going to show you some research in the middle of this program that's going to kind of throw everything I say about stress out the window, because it's really fascinating when we start to understand the power of our thinking and how we can be resilient and how we can bounce back. And definitely is one of the most effective tools that we can have, is how we think about stress. So that's what we're going to cover today. And you can see it in our agenda here. We're going to look at all the physical and mental, emotional, spiritual impacts of stress, but we're going to really emphasize thinking in here and talk about resiliency at the end. So let's look at stress and what is it anyway? And I'm sure many of you have your own interpretations, and you've probably gone through your own stress management programs before. So it's our body's natural defense against real or imagined threats and danger. And it's really important to understand this right from the get-go, because we have a lot of imagined things that occur. And typically the imagined things are brought in by our thinking. So our body flushes with hormones in preparation for this fight or flight. And I'm again assuming that many of you have heard this before. So we release an abundant quantity of different stressors, different stress hormones like cortisol. And I'm assuming a lot of you have probably heard of these before. Cortisol really gets a lot of attention because people who have a lot of stress tend to carry it in their tummies or in their stomachs. So you may be in perfect shape, right? Every place on your body is, perfectly weighted, but you carry this little thing, this little, pouch, right? And that a lot of times is because of cortisol. So we have symptoms that are kind of showing us where the stress lands. And it's really important that we understand those symptoms. Adrenaline, we know, you slam on the brakes, you almost get hit in traffic, that rush, right? That feeling of adrenaline comes in. So there's a lot of these hormones that affect us. So the sympathetic nervous system is what gets going when we have these stress responses. So sympathetic, I really wish they would have used a different word, because it makes it seem like, like we feel sympathy for something. That's not what this means. The sympathetic nervous system is where all heck breaks loose, right? So our heart races, our blood pressure goes up, we have sweaty palms, we may not sleep well, we may have agitation. There's a lot of things that happen when the sympathetic nervous system happens, and it's unconscious. So it does this on its own. So it's really important. Then we have to take measures to reduce it. So we'll look at that too. So the body is a very intelligent operating system. And what's interesting is that it doesn't know the difference between life-threatening situations from real or imagined stressors. And we're going to look at the real and imagined so that you know what I'm talking about. The body reacts exactly the same way. So why create more stressful situations? Because most of them are imagined, right? So one of the very first tools is to say to ourselves, what can we control? There's so many things we can't control, but there's so many things that we can. And again, a lot of it goes back to how we think about this. So the other nervous system, which is called the parasympathetic. Now, the parasympathetic is really important because it works exactly the opposite of the sympathetic. And it is the calming nervous system. It's the one that slows us down. It relaxes us. It really gets us back to that baseline. Now, this is also subconscious, but we can do more about this. We can create this. We can bring this about. So when the sympathetic gets switched on, the parasympathetic gets switched off. So we really want to reduce as much of that sympathetic as possible, because we see the calming, the healing gets turned off. So again, we look at what can we control? What are some of the very first things that we can do to make sure that that parasympathetic is operating on all cylinders and that parasympathetic is really being shut down. So we need to reduce the impacts from that sympathetic. Both of them are unconscious. However, we can take conscious actions. Okay, so you're hearing me really emphasize thinking and behavior and focus on the things that we can control. It's one of the first strategies and tools that we can use for any type of stressful situation. So let's look at this reel and imagine. And I know most of you will remember this way back, or maybe you are currently dating and it is stressful, right? We're imagining, are we going to click? How does my hair look anyway? We think about all these things in preparation for a real experience, right? And you're saying to yourself, maybe days in advance, maybe this isn't such a great idea, or maybe I don't feel good enough about myself, or maybe this person, they don't like the color of my hair, whatever. We can put a lot of challenging thoughts in our minds. But we know what happens on these situations, right? It can affect our sleep days before because we get nervous. We may get sweaty palms. Our heart may race. We may have elevated blood pressure, right? So what's happening in this real situation, I'm sure many of you can think back about this, or if you are currently dating, it's a stressful situation, right? So that's real. Now let's look at scary. So this is an imagined situation, right? However, this is a choice. And we say to ourselves, we know this is not really happening, okay? We go to this scary movie. I can tell you my daughter and I absolutely love scary movies. We sat and watched one the other night. I pulled up the blanket in front of my eyes. I'm like plugging my ears with my fingers, even though I know it's not real, but the same situation, the same physiological responses that happen on that left are happening on this right. My blood pressure is going up. My heart is racing. I'm getting sweaty palms, and it's probably going to disrupt my sleep after I see the movie. The two of these, we have choices in, right? The one on the right, do we have to watch a scary movie every single day? Absolutely not. So I don't want to bring about this physiological response. It's not good for me, right? I'm going to reduce the amount of these imagined situations. Now, this is kind of an extreme imagined situation, and I'm going to showcase some other ones for you that you could probably relate to. But certainly the one on the left, we don't have a lot of control over that, but we can do some meditation. We do some relaxation. We can go for a walk. We can give ourselves some really positive thoughts to reduce the stress that we feel from that real situation. Okay. So let's look at these three different types of stress. And it's important that we recognize these. Now, what I can tell you is that because of COVID, all of these I have seen an acceleration in with clients and patients that I have worked with. And what we want to keep aware of is that every one of these can progress. So if we can really manage them in their earliest stages, they don't progress to the worst, which is chronic. So we want to be able to manage these as they come up, do some positive thinking about them, get them out as quickly as possible. Because when they continue to escalate, then we start to see other problems occur in our lives as a result of that. So step one is to control our choices and reduce exposure to unnecessary stress and think, how can we get back to baseline before these things accelerate? So the very first one is acute. And acute stress is that stuff that we all experience every single day. Many of you have gone through numerous acute situations this morning. Leading up to our training today, it was Monday, right? Lots of things seem to go haywire on Monday. Maybe we got up late this morning. Maybe the kids were really like running around the house trying to find their stuff, right, getting ready for school. Maybe you and your spouse were not getting along. Maybe you didn't sleep well right last night because you're thinking about a deadline that you had today. All of those are considered acute stress. And they are usually brief. They're the most common. and they are most often caused by thinking. So there's that whole agenda item again, right? Thinking, because we go into the next situation and we carry that with us. So how many times have you been in traffic? Someone cuts you off, or, really barrels by you really fast, and you immediately say, that jerk, what's wrong with them, right? We have that huge adrenaline rush. And what comes with that is those thoughts. And sometimes we actually act on a thought, right? Sometimes we chase the driver down. Sometimes we go to work, and the first thing we do when we walk into work is we stop and we tell someone else about it. So we've carried it in our heads to the next situation. So when the very first stress management tools that we use is to not carry it in our thoughts to the next situation. So those negative thoughts about any of those recent situations or events or upcoming situation and events. So we really need to, again, manage our thinking about this. Maybe you had a recent argument or negative repetitive thoughts about it. Like, I'm sure many of us can relate to this. We get in a fight with somebody, we have a conflict, and in our minds, we're like, boy, I should have said this to that person, right? After the fact, you're still thinking about it. You're still kind of ruminating about all that. And it's all in our thinking, instead of saying, you know what, I'm really glad not to be a jerk like them, right? There's a lot of ways that we can look at this. We can learn to laugh at situations. We can learn to say, thank goodness it didn't get worse than that. So again, how we think can have a huge, huge impact on this acute stress. Maybe upcoming work deadlines. Again, that stress is thought induced. If I don't get this done, oh no, what's going to happen? Instead of saying, you know what, I work really hard at my work. I want to make sure this gets done correctly. I'm sure my boss understands that I'm really, really dedicated to this. Again, shifting our thinking. So reduce or remove the thinking, and guess what? The stress subsides too. So I know we can get this resolved without a conflict. When I manage my time, I reach my goals. So one of the things that I would strongly encourage anybody that's going through a lot of this acute stress is make a list of things, journal about them, and write down what else you can say, those positives. I'm capable. I know that I can do this. I know that that was a mistake and I'm not going to be losing my job. I know that my partner or my spouse and I can work through these problems. It's really important to interject those thoughts into our minds. So why should we care? Because with this ongoing stress attack, we have excessive health problems that may occur. And I'm going to put that in here because we're going to look at some of this research, but it may occur with this constant sympathetic response. Many of you probably know people that are highly, highly stressed. Now, they may not be in this acute stress state, but you know people that live in this chronic stress state. These people who seem to have stress all the time, many times you see them having other health problems too, right? They may have heart attacks. They may have high blood pressure. They may have a stroke. They're not taking care of themselves. So one example would be high blood pressure, which is a major risk factor for heart disease. And we know that this happens with this constant flow of stress in people's lives. So this stress response also can suppress our immune system. And I think what we were definitely learning about throughout COVID is the importance of really bolstering our immune system. And because we don't want to be more susceptible to other illnesses, not just COVID. People seem to forget that there were lots of other illnesses going on during COVID. We definitely saw a lot of mental health issues. Suicide rates were huge. Addiction issues have gone through the roof. So there's a lot of other things going on. It's not just COVID. So we need to be mindful of that. So how do we prevent the progression? And really, we're just talking about this acute stress because we don't want it to get worse. We don't want it to progress because that's when we start to see other problems come up in our lives if it does progress. So we can activate what's called the relaxation response. And this technique was developed back in Harvard by Dr. Herbert Benson, if you want to Google about this, in the 70s. So it's been around for 50 plus years. And the relaxation response is this state of really profound rest. And a lot of people that go through yoga and meditation will tell you that this is what happens over time. So these are really simple strategies that you could do at your seat in the office. It doesn't take hours. It can happen in a matter of minutes. So mindful breathing is one of the most common features that are used in relaxation responses. So when we're babies, we use what's called diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is when we breathe with our stomachs. And as we get older, we start to breathe more shortly and just with our chests. And so one of the things that we could do is sit back, breathe in at the count of 4 very slowly, and really pay attention to your stomach doing the breathing. And then let that air back out in maybe a count of 6. Do that 3 or 4 times. It's amazing that simple action can bring about such a relaxed state. And you don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to go run a marathon. You can do that in a matter of minutes at your desk. How do we remember to do this? Because we put Post-it notes up, because we write it in our calendar, because we put it in our phone. This is really, really important and simple stuff that we can do every day. When you breathe deeply, the air coming in through your nose fully fills your lungs and your lower belly rises. And this is such an effective tool. So not only the meditation, yoga, progressive muscle relaxation, like you're sitting at your desk and you just stretch out one arm and then you stretch out the other arm. And then you pay attention to stretching out your legs and your feet and your neck. Very relaxing. Remember, it brings about that parasympathetic response. That's what we're trying to do, is consciously bring about this relaxation effect that the sympathetic comes in and really devours, okay? So it's simple and effective, that deep breathing, several techniques that can help you turn down your responses. So keep in mind, and I've given you some links here too. As I said before, you will get the PowerPoint. You can link into these. There are some really great YouTube videos that you can watch this. A lot of people get very confused about yoga and meditation. It's really just being present and paying attention and not getting distracted, closing your eyes, sitting upright so that you don't fall asleep. And you just watch where your thoughts go, kind of like the clouds in the sky, that you just slow your brain down. What we really want to do is reduce inflammation, reduce our body's response to stress. And again, this is all parasympathetic and it's very, very, very effective. I will tell you, I work with a lot of leaders. I do leadership coaching. The people that I work with that are the most successful in their businesses, especially long-term, it's amazing how calm they are. And most of those individuals I work with use some type of meditation. I work with people that have been using meditation for 15 or 20 years every day. It's kind of like when we jump out of the shower, we grab our towel, right? It is a habit, and it's one of the easiest, simplest, most effective things that we can do to get ourselves back to that baseline and really start to feel calm and reduce some of the impacts of the sympathetic nervous system. So as I said before, you're going to get the PowerPoint, so you'll have these links that you can use. So some other interventions: go for a walk. Maybe, what a beautiful day, right? You can go for a walk during lunch. Maybe you can go out right after work, get down to the park, enjoy, disconnect from technology. Don't have your phone with you all the time. Practice gratitude. Focus on the things that you have. When you look around, turn on the news, realize how good we've got it. Try to find that humor in those situations. Laugh at yourself, right? Realize that people act the way they feel, and their behavior typically isn't about you. I have quite a few people that always think that, people are out to get them. And in all actuality, when people are acting nasty, it's because they feel nasty. They don't feel good. So we're always a mirror of how we feel. Maybe call a friend. I think it's really important. There's one stress hormone, it's called oxytocin. It's hugely effective. Oxytocin gets released when we share. So it's really important that we talk to other people, We take that problem we have and we cut it in half. That's what I always remind people of is if you have a problem, share it. It gets cut in half. We release what's called oxytocin. That oxytocin really floods our systems. It's a feel-good hormone. It has cardiovascular benefits. We're going to learn a little bit more about that as well in the program. Maybe say a prayer if you're a spiritual person, but the interventions are much simpler in acute stress. And that's how we want them to stay, because if we don't, they progress to episodic acute stress. Now, episodic acute stress are those people who really seem to be highly stressed. I'm sure most of you know someone like this. They seem to have a lot of chaos in their lives. There's crisis. They seem to be in a rush, pressured for time, take on too many responsibilities, have poor organizational skills, right? So we know who these folks are. We see them at work, we see them at home, we see them at the kids' soccer games, right? So we know they're there. And there are two different types. So episodic acute stress comes in these two different forms. The first one is called type A. Now, I'm sure we've heard of type A's before, right? And I'm sure many of you know type A's. And I will tell you that I am a type A and I know type A's very well. Type A's call me quite a bit because type A's typically don't talk about the problems. They keep them inside. They're deeply personally competitive with themselves, not with other people. They have a tendency to be impatient. They want things done yesterday, and they can react with hostility. But the one thing about the type A that's really important is that because they have a tendency to stuff their issues and not talk about them, they are at a much greater risk for developing heart disease. So really important if you are a type A to practice what I just taught you in the acute stress. Focus on thinking, focus on sharing, focus on deep breathing, focus on some of the yoga, the meditation, the relaxation, because this person is pretty stressed out. We know type A's because they're on the go, they're grinding all the time, and that will only take a toll if it keeps going on for too long. The other type is called the worrier. And the worrier is this person who has, guess what? Lots of negative thoughts. So there's that thinking piece again. They are called the worry warts, right? So they are always thinking that catastrophe is right around the corner. If they win the lottery, they are doom and gloom about the taxes. Okay, so they have a hard time looking at the positives. They really think the rug is about to be pulled out from underneath them. And they believe the world's pretty darn dangerous and unrewarding. So it's unfortunate because both the type A and the worrier have probably come from a world that wasn't really secure for them. So they're learning in their own way not to trust, not to tell, not to share, and to think bad thoughts again. So there's that thinking again. They have a tendency to be binge thinkers too. So they get over aroused. They have that frequent thought of what if this happens, right? So they have a very difficult time saying, oh, I'm going to be successful at this. They really think that no matter what, something bad is going to happen. So both of these types require more than just deep breathing, right? Because we know that this is happening on a regular basis for these people. These people are living in this grip. And so if this is you, or if this is somebody that you know, the interventions are more serious too, and they require a lot of consistency. So some daily long-term interventions focused on solutions, not problems, removing the stressor. One of the best things we can do, remove the stressor, right? So if that's a person, if it's a relationship, if it's a job, if it's a person, if it's a friend, try to think about how can we reduce the exposure with these things that really trigger us. Make an appointment with the EAP. It's a free service. It's great that you can talk to somebody. It's confidential. They can't report it to your workplace. It's a wonderful tool. make an appointment with a medical professional and get your, your physical exam done. Make sure that you don't have other issues as a result of this. Focus on sleep health, 7 to 8 hours a day. I know a lot of people say, well, I wish, I get 4 or 5. Well, that's not good for your brain, folks. Physical exercise, again, you don't have to go join the gym, but you need to be moving your body, reducing inflammation, maybe attend a support group or a 12-step program, meditation, guided imagery, and avoid relying on mood altering substances because the problem's still there when you come back, right? So again, the interventions, more serious, more consistent. And again, we want to not let this progress because if it does, it goes to this. Now, most people who have chronic stress, I will tell you, typically are not showing up to work. Now, what I've noticed in COVID is that all of these have progressed more so. So we're seeing more people in episodic acute stress than acute stress, and we're seeing more people in chronic stress. And that really is because many people have been living in this situation for over 2 years now. So chronic stress requires longer term exposure to stressors. So that's what we know. But typically, it's people who have had lifelong situations. But I will tell you, we're seeing more people in these chronic stress states. It's the most harmful type, which I'm assuming that you could figure that out based on how we're progressing here. Left untreated over a long period of time can significantly and irreversibly affect our health. And again, we're going to look at some interesting research about this too. Some of the causes: long-term poverty, maybe there's been an abusive relationship in people's lives, extensive unemployment histories. Again, we're seeing that in COVID states. Maybe some dysfunctional family dynamics. People are working from home more, and we definitely have seen impacts in relationships more so, negative impacts in relationships because these people don't have a lot of separation like they did before. Poor work environments, maybe substance abuse, maybe experiences as a child that were never resolved. So there are many, many causes, but we see long-term, okay? And it can also occur from feeling pretty hopeless. So when people see like their situation is a hopeless situation, we definitely start to see chronic health situations. And that's where I always remind people about mental health issues and suicide issues. And if that's ever an issue, call the EAP, call 911. Don't just think that this is going to miraculously disappear. These are people who have had stress for a very long time, and the interventions are more serious. So what we do know about chronic stress is that the neurobiology, basically the makeup of the brain and the body, change with chronic stress. That means that this constant flow of stress changes the brain. So when we look at brains and we look at scans of brains, we can see atrophy, so the brain shrinks. We can see changes in the whole landscape of the brain. And the brain does not know the difference between chronic stress and acute stress. So once we get to these chronic stress states, every type of stress we feel feels like chronic stress, and the body in turn responds exactly the same way. So again, you're hearing me kind of get on my soapbox about this. We do not want these things to progress. If a person is in a chronic stress state, we typically do not see a lot of them at work. Now, again, I said because of COVID, we've seen more people in the workplace experiencing these, but typically these folks are taking a lot of time off. They have FMLA and disability leaves. They are chronically stressed and have these unstable work histories. They typically have and require this multiple modality approach to their care. So they're seeing multiple doctors. They may be seeing psychiatry and psychology, getting medication management for their mental health issues. And the interventions require numerous other approaches as well. So some of these other tools that I've mentioned, like meditation, guided imagery, hypnosis, EMDR, which is an eye movement technique that's done in psychology, So again, you could see the interventions, again, more serious, more consistent. So if that is something that you are experiencing, or if that's something that you are seeing someone else experience, again, EAP is a great tool to call. Talking to your doctor about it, making an appointment with a mental health professional, strongly advise this. Okay, so now we've covered all the 3 different types. And now it's really important. We're going to look at some research that's really going to look at some of this and throw some of it out of the window. Now, I don't want to throw it all out the window, but I do want to stress the thinking elements. This research is very recent, and there are numerous research studies that are showing this right now. And again, it's really going to bring to light the importance of how we think. So following these examples that I just showed you, which of these stress experiences have you experienced in the last year? So think about what I just shared with you. What are you all experiencing? And please, you don't have to share that with me on here because I want to keep you confidential, but just think about that. Which one do you feel like you are experiencing? Is it acute stress? Is it episodic acute stress? Is it chronic stress? The second question is, do you believe stress is harmful? Now, you just heard me on my soapbox for 35 minutes talking about, we want to be really careful, right? But if you didn't hear me say this, and if you knew what you were going through before and didn't really think that stress was harmful, this is what some of the research is going to show you. So what you think about stress will affect success. Now, I can tell you this personally in my life. I've had numerous caregiving situations where I was in the heart and the depth of it, and it was overwhelming to me. But ultimately, at the end of these caregiving situations, my health ended up being better, which was really, really strange. This is way before I knew about this research. And I was like, that just doesn't make sense. How can my health be better after I went through such a stressful situation? So we're going to look at some of that. So this first study tracked 30,000 adults in the US for 8 years. And each participant was asked 2 questions. Guess which ones? The same ones I just asked you. How much stress have you experienced in the last year? And do you believe that stress is harmful for your health? After 8 years of this study, public death records were used to find out who died. I know it sounds pretty morbid, but the findings are pretty fascinating. So people who experience a lot of stress, now it doesn't say exactly how, showed a 43% increased risk of dying. But what was found in this study is that only applied to people who believed that their stress was harmful for their health. So, and I'm like shaking my head. I remember when I first learned about this, watched the researcher, talked to the psychologist about this. This was a really fascinating study. And people who didn't believe that stress was harmful actually had the lowest levels of death. And again, pretty fascinating research here on this. But what came to light from this, we're going to look at this, is that over 8 years of the study, research suggests that about 182,000 deaths occurred prematurely who people believed stress was bad for them. Now, that was just a piece of the research study. Now, what came out of this, and this other study I'm going to show you, is really going to hone in on this one stress hormone that I mentioned to you. It's called oxytocin. And the conclusion was from this research study is that changing your thoughts about stress can change your physical response. Now, I mentioned to you that I went through a personal situation. Now, I'm a counselor, I'm a coach, I've been in the mental health field for 30 years. And I've been the one saying that, stress is really harmful for you because that's what we were taught. But I was left wondering, how come this didn't happen to me, right? How come my health was actually better? What I will tell you is throughout that whole experience is that I did everything that I could to keep myself really, really healthy during that time. I was talking to people. I went to a support group. I was exercising as much as possible. I was doing deep breathing exercises. I was meditating. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind because not only having those positive thoughts, but being hopeful and also incorporating some of these simple strategies. And so this is really important. I work with a lot of caregivers who are in these unbelievably stressful situations, but I will tell you that most of them are also doing this combined approach. It's not just thinking positively, it's combining it with action. And so what I'm going to stress is that we really, really need to keep in mind that we can't just put ourselves in these high stress situations every single day and not do something else. Even if it's simple breathing, even if it's taking a walk, even if it's just talking to somebody about that, what we're seeing now is that the outcome can be vastly different for people with these highly stressful situations. So how do we do this with our thinking? So when we encounter these stressful producing situations, which we all have, we've got to convert these thoughts. When my heart pounds, I don't say, oh, that means I'm afraid and I can't be successful. It means I feel energy and I have an opportunity to really be successful now. I'm going to be good at this. When you think it, your body responds accordingly. And there's too much evidence that's pointing into this direction. Again, I do not want people to go, oh, okay, so I'm going to go out and just put myself in the worst, most stressful situations I possibly can. No, but when you are in these stressful situations, we want to remember this combination approach to managing our stress. This changed thinking can certainly result in our improved physical response. So that parasympathetic response can really, really get activated. So let's look at this other component here. So stress also makes you social. I mentioned to you this really important hormone. It's called oxytocin. It's been given the nickname the cuddle hormone, and we've known this for years, and especially in the mental health field. This is a really important hormone because it gets released from human connection. So as a counselor, right, all the counselors that I know, we're all going to say to people, you know what, talk about it, right? That's why you're coming to see me. You're going to talk about it. You're going to split that issue in half. But there's this biochemical response that happens when we share. So oxytocin gets released. And it really does fine tune our social instincts. So the interesting thing about oxytocin, not only does it help us, but it actually helps the other person that we're talking to, because when they're talking to us or listening to us, their oxytocin gets released. And oxytocin has this huge cardiovascular benefit to it. So remember the type A's that I mentioned to you. Type A's have that internal mechanism where they stuff it, right? And they don't talk about it. And remember, they're the ones that are more likely to have these cardiovascular events. When we release oxytocin and share it, it actually helps to heal this whole process. This cardiovascular system gets this resiliency just from oxytocin being released. So again, one of the most important things we can do is talk about it and share it. So the heart has this natural receptor for this hormone, and it really does help to strengthen the heart. So it's important. It's a simple strategy. It's a simple tool. Again, just talking to somebody and focus on the solutions. Don't just sit and complain about the situation. Talk about, this is how I want this to go. This is the hope that I have. These are the strategies that I want. This is how I want to feel when this is done. And again, really, really thought provoking. So when you reach out for help or to help, you release more of this and you become healthier. This is called resiliency. So this other caregiver stress research study was really interesting. Again, it was a smaller study, and it showed 1,000 adults, and they were studying stress and caregiving. And the question was, again, how much stress in the last year, and how much time have you spent helping people during this time? And then they studied the death records for about 5 years. Now, this is really interesting too. That death risks increase for lots of major life experiences, except for people who were in caregiving situations. Again, that was really fascinating to me because I work with caregivers every single day. And I truly believe that that oxytocin has so much to do with this. So also choosing to view your stress response is helpful. Like, I am going to help someone right now. I'm going to be there for somebody right now, is much different than saying, oh, I'm just going to sit and complain about this right now, right? So I'm choosing to go help and to go listen and to go talk with somebody. And you're naturally helping yourself heal at the same time as you're helping them to heal. Again, it's great. It's this internal mechanism that we have that most people don't even know. And I really feel for people who don't share. And this is something I remind people of all the time. It's okay to share. It's okay to talk about your issues, but also talk about the solutions and talk about how you can improve your situation. So we've mentioned resiliency. We've gone through all these different types of stress. We've talked about some of these interesting research studies, but now we need to really understand, what is this resiliency and how do we embark upon it and how do we bring it about? So when you look at this image, I like a couple of these images I'm going to show you about resiliency. It really is a process, and it's a process of adapting well when adversity hits. So that could be in the form of trauma, tragedy, threats, stressors affecting our lives, affecting our families. There's a lot of different things that can happen to us. But resiliency is looking at that situation and saying, how can I get back to that baseline? Remember that at the very beginning, I was saying we always want to get back to our very beginning point where that parasympathetic is being activated and we're feeling calm and we're reducing that stress response. So resilient people really do have characteristics that we see on a consistent basis. They see challenges, but they also see opportunities. They think positively, committed to goals. They focus on what they can control. So right at the very beginning of the program, where I was emphasizing, what can you do to control the situation? Reduce the amount of imagined danger, right? Put yourself in situations where the stress is going to be short-term, learn how to laugh about it, learn how to move it out of your mindset as quickly as possible. Be empathetic. Think about what other people are going through and turn to other people, help other people. Those truly are the qualities of resilient people. And it's important to understand resiliency is not an exceptional characteristic. Everyone has it. Every single time we release oxytocin, we are resilient. So it's not something that people have to go and learn how to do a brand new skill. We just have to do it more consistently. So how resilient are you? And these are good questions that you can ask yourself. Like I said, you're going to get the PowerPoint. You can look through some of this and you can say, well, I need to really look at this with me. So the capacity to adapt to negative change, ask yourself, do you feel like you can return to that baseline as quickly as you, I guess, should be able to, and should's up to you? And do you understand how your beliefs affect your feelings, how your feelings affect your thoughts, and how your thoughts affect how you behave? So again, ultimately, it comes down to how do we think, because our thinking is certainly going to impact how we act. If I realize that someone cuts me off in traffic and we say, instead of them being a jerk, we go, oh my gosh, they may have an emergency in their life and they may be, they may have gotten a call and are heading to an emergency. Thank goodness that's not happening to me, right? It's that whole shift in how we think about things. Resiliency is not a trait that you either have or you don't. I said, everyone has resiliency tools. Everyone has oxytocin. What a natural tool that we have. It's not extraordinary. We just need to develop it more. We need to get reminders in place. Put the Post-it notes up on your computer screen. Put it on your phone. Put it on a mirror at home. Put it on the refrigerator. Keep reminding yourself to be hopeful, to think things positively. So it's important that we establish a new habit with resiliency. And this is another great image I think is important that, you can cut this out, you can hang it up, you can read this and remind yourself every day. Over time, we start to create these new thoughts, we start to create new habits. And it's important that we learn to make that resiliency habit. So a resilient person is likely to recognize and manage their own feelings and also understand the feelings of others. So that's that empathy. They have a sense of independence and sense of self-worth. They form and maintain healthy, positive, mutually respectful relationships. And that's a really good assessment question to ask yourself. Look at the people that you share your time with in your life. I've always thought that's a great assessment tool to say, if I have a bunch of negative people around me, negative people are probably going to want to be around negative people. Positive people are going to want to be around positive people. If you are surrounded by negatives, it's an important time to really, shake things up a little bit and think about, what am I saying? What am I leading with here? Am I being resilient, or am I just being a complainer, right? So when you're sharing, it's not about sharing all the bad. It's about listening. It's about finding solutions. So be able to solve problems and make informed decisions, and also have a sense of purpose and goals for the future. So have your own vision, and no matter what's happening, remind yourself that you've got this purpose and you've got some goals. So some characteristics just to think about. These are, again, personal questions to ask yourself. Where are you at with your own resiliency? Practice some of these mind calming and restorative activities. There's a whole bunch of them that I listed at the very beginning. You're going to get links to these. You can open up some of those YouTube videos and watch them. Challenge yourself to keep yourself learning and learn to view the future with optimism. We definitely have come through a lot in the last 2.5 years, and I don't think anybody ever knew the outcome of this, but now we can see that light, right? We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Avoid extreme responses and never give up on the importance of some of your important personal pursuits. Make choices that are consistently held with your values. So again, if you have those negative people, think about, maybe I need to not spend time with them. Maybe I need to focus more on some of these things that bring about these values that I have in my life, and have a sense of purpose and vision as you go about. So I did want to include in your program, if you are so interested in taking a resiliency test, I think a lot of people like to do these. This is a free test. And again, when you get the PowerPoint, you're going to see this. So you don't necessarily have to write this down now, but it's a really good exercise to go through. And maybe take that test and see. Sometimes you might surprise yourself, and you may realize that you're a lot more resilient than you think you are. Or you may discover that there's some areas that you can work in. And I also wanted to give you some other resources in the event that you want to pick up some books, look at some places that actually offer some mindfulness and meditation training. There are some online tools that you can get. So some meditation, some even online yoga classes. I know several people that teach those. Some really great books. I would emphasize the first one. It's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. If you've never read that book, it's probably one of the most inspiring, resiliency inspiring books that I've ever read. I don't want to kind of spoil it for you. So if you want to look that up, it's really, really a helpful book and can really bring about some ideas of how resiliency is so important in our lives. And then finally, the last slide, as I said to you before, contact impact. Please, if you're feeling that you really need to talk to somebody, or if you're struggling with somebody in your personal life and you want to talk to somebody confidentially, you can certainly look them up online. You can call them and have a confidential conversation with somebody. And don't do this alone. As I'm sure you've heard me now stress that enough. It's important to share with other people. It's self-healing, and it's certainly healing for other people as well. So got a couple minutes here, and Caitlin, I see you're back, and there we go. So I know it always.
I was just going to say, does anyone have any questions?
I know it always throws a wrench into it. We're talking about all the stress, and then I go, yeah, some of this research now is really showing us some different stuff.
Yeah, no, that statistic about the increased risk of death with the stress was really astounding. That's good. What was it, 46%? Is that what it was?
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
really
remember.
astounding.
Yeah. No, I remember,
Um,
and I work with so many caregivers, and it's really fascinating because sometimes my caregivers are the healthiest people, and I was like, how is that possible? But it's because they're doing a lot of other things too. They're not just thinking positive thoughts. They're doing other things as well. So I think
Yeah.
it's important to keep that in mind.
I loved what you said about when you share your stress, you cut it in half. Because
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, when something really like frustrates me, makes me mad, upsets me, I'm calling like my mom, my fiance, my best friend, get it off my chest. And then like, I'm good. I just talked it out and they get me through it and validate my feelings. And then I'm good to move on. But when you sit there and you just think about it and like, don't let it off your chest, it just stays there. You just hold on to it. So thank you for making me feel validated there. I
Yeah,
appreciate
that's
that.
good. There you
But
go. That's good.
yes.
And you released all that oxytocin. That's great.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
all did. Yes, we love it. We love it. We love oxytocin. So that's great. So if anyone doesn't have any other questions, we'll let Kelsey go, but I'll be sending this recording out to all of your inboxes. Kelsey, you said you would share the slides from
Yeah.
the presentation. That would be amazing because I know you had some awesome resources. So we would love to share that. And for those of you that are still here, I will be sending out our week 2 resources for dealing with stress and resilience. So this was a perfect pair because Kelsey, we're focusing on mental health this month, and this week our focus is
Good.
stress. So I have some tools and stuff, and your presentation complemented that perfectly. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Caitlin. And thanks to everybody. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.